the Anthropocene is marked by environmental destruction. A key quality of this time is the unnerving awareness that our behavior as a creature may lead us to our own demise. Whether through runaway climate change, toxic pollution, resource depletion, geopolitical conflicts, or even the fall of our global civilization. But how did we get from the first nomadic Homo sapiens who expanded out of Africa to this modern creature that finds itself tangled in such an interwoven, complex mess of its own making? There are many, many answers to this question, and all are woven in upon one another. But fundamentally, one cannot understand our global civilization without first understanding the role of agriculture. Human beings are a storytelling, myth-making creature. Rather than diving into an uncertain history, in order to understand agriculture, it might be best to begin with the myth of the fall.
I'm always fascinated by the story of the Garden of Eden, the story of the fall. It's such a great story. And if you look at that story, what it's telling you is exactly that. It's the consequence of what happens when you break the natural order and try to do things for yourself. So in the garden, you have everything that's ever created. All of the creatures, all the birds, you have God himself. God's walking around. You can see God in the Garden of Eden like a person. And then you've got the man and the woman, the two people. And you've got these two trees in the garden. You've got the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and you've got the tree of life. And the only thing we have to do is not eat the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because what that does is it gives us knowledge before we're ready for it. And actually the Christian story is that eventually God wants us to eat that fruit, but only when we're mature. But of course, we're tempted by the adversary, by the devil, who says, now you don't want to listen to God, do it yourself, you can have the power now. So that's what we do. We eat the fruit, and immediately we realize we're naked, which means we've become self-aware, we become individualists, we desire power, we desire knowledge, and at that point we get expelled from the garden, because we can't exist within the natural law anymore, we can't exist within communion. And what's the consequence of being expelled from the garden? We have to start farming, we have to break the soil.
Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden to spend the rest of their days tilling the earth and eating the fruits of the field, their lands cursed to never produce enough. In order to survive, man would need to battle nature for the rest of his days. Man was cursed to toil forever. The punishment for disobeying God's commands, so the story goes, is agriculture. The story of agriculture being a curse contradicts the other narrative that most of us learn about agriculture. That before we discovered how to domesticate seeds and animals, we were starving, bumbling savages, barely holding on, barely surviving from day to day, until suddenly we discovered we no longer had to live at the capricious whims of nature. That, in the words of Thomas Hobbes, life was nasty, brutish, and short. Now, with agriculture, we could finally control where our food came from. Though toolmaking, language, culture, and mortality are the key defining features of humanity, one thing lies at the center, connecting everything, and that is food and its procurement. Humanity's relationship to food underlies the myth of the Garden of Eden, but it also underlies the structure of civilization itself. How we feed ourselves is what makes us, us. Through agriculture, our entire relationship to the world was changed. It took time for the world to be dominated by a hyper-industrial, factory farm-based agricultural system, but the seeds of this end were germinated in its beginnings.
The moment you put a plow to soil, you degrade that soil. You take that chunk of land and you clear every living thing off it. And I mean down to the bacteria. Like, all the life is removed bit by bit. And then you just plant one thing, and it's all for humans. So all of that life is gone. So it's biotic cleansing, is what I call it.
It was through agriculture that man started to have an adversarial relationship to life, biodiversity, and the natural order of things, a problem which plagues us today as we try to control more waterways. Eradicate biodiversity in the service of one crop. Genetically modify plants and animals to be more productive, spraying chemicals, forcing animals into confinement. And denuding soil of life and fertility through our extractive practices, ordering the world for our own uses. This process is thousands of years in the making. But how we got from there to here is complicated. Agriculture developed all over the world at around the same time, and in all cases, civilization soon followed.
So people take up agriculture, and an entirely new way of life begins that we call civilization.
Along with civilization, writing was developed independently in every region that agriculture dominated, primarily as a way of accounting for grain, livestock, land, and eventually, slaves. Money, debt, and taxation developed independently soon after. Once food and land had a quantifiable value, it became more important than ever to control the output of the land, simplifying the land so that it only produced the one thing that was of value. It also became more important than ever to control people.
So what does civilization mean? Well, it's people living in densities that require the importation of resources. Every single civilization that has existed has done exactly this. They've used up their own stuff. They've destroyed their forests. They've destroyed their soil. They've destroyed their waterways. They've destroyed their coastline. So the food, the water, the energy have got to come from somewhere else, because the city has destroyed its own and built on it. At that point, you're going to have to go out and get that stuff and bring it back in. They take it all, and then they go and they conquer their neighbors, and that's called imperialism. You're going to have to conquer your neighbors to get it, because nobody willingly gives up their land, their water, their trees, their fish. You're going to have to take it from them. And that is the pattern of civilization. It's a feature, not a bug. And that's the problem.
Agriculture enabled an entirely different strategy for human survival. Whereas before, cooperation within small-scale communities was incentivized. Now, competition was incentivized. Egalitarianism would be replaced by hierarchies in a way that wasn't possible before. Sedentarization required new social rules which favored the few over the many, and as our numbers increased, our connection with one another decreased. Kinship bonds transformed into transactional bonds, and atomization began. Our relationship to how we procured food transformed our relationships with each other, as well as the societal structure itself. Ultimately, without controlling people's access to food, civilization couldn't exist. As the author Daniel Quinn described, for the past 10,000 years, the culture that arose to dominate our world is a culture where food is under lock and key.
What have people done to the planet? Where did the wound start? Like, where did the destruction begin? And the answer, honestly, is agriculture.
Though agriculture was not one watershed moment, and though it might be considered by some to be overly simplistic to point to one thing as the genesis of our current crises, it is undeniable that agriculture acted as a profound catalyst, leading us into the world we live in today. On a mythic level, agriculture and its progeny have allowed us to attempt to remake the world for our own uses. We learned how to manipulate the living world for us, and only us. Whether the worldview that created agriculture was tainted by some evil, or agriculture came first, perverting our understanding of our place in the world, we will never know. But it is undeniable that this modern quest to control and dominate the world was at least accelerated tremendously as agriculture began its emergence in our world. Some of our biggest technological advancements came as a result of agriculture, just as tool use seems to have emerged for the purposes of food procurement. Irrigation and tillage were some of our first true machine-like machinations, and from there, we've expanded, terraforming the world into large collections of monocultures. Primarily for export in a hyper-complex, energy-intensive global system. Industrialization only accelerated the process that began thousands of years before. The diversity of culture and biological life has been simplified into one crop, one global culture of commerce, a food that requires money to acquire. The free bounty of Eden is gone. Now, we must pay. Rather than food sovereignty, we use comparative advantage, with each region growing as much of the one thing that grows best in that region, to the destruction of biodiversity and cultural diversity. 200 indigenous corn varieties are reduced to one genetically modified, patented product. Creatures such as salmon, pigs, and cows are denied their birth and death rights and live their lives in pens, spawned in factories. The only reason we do this is because it's profitable, and because we can. Technologies such as fertilizers, pesticides, genetic modification, and other highly technological interventions allow us to keep this global agricultural system alive, albeit hanging by a thread. Each year, our global civilization gets more and more entrenched in this unsustainable way of procuring food, one which requires the mass importation and exportation of resources all around the world. Our modern food system is reliant on fossil fuels, non-renewable resources like potassium and phosphate, a global cold chain which uses a gargantuan amount of energy, and a system of trade that leads to around 40% of all food produced being wasted. We're pumping non-renewable aquifers dry and exporting that water all over the world. Though we produce enough food to feed 10 billion people, each year nearly 1 billion people go hungry. Our system is wasteful, manipulated by politics and institutions which aim to control, and is fundamentally structured to maintain a particular sort of economic system rather than stewarding resilience, sustainability, and sovereignty. There is a derangement in the way we procure food, which leads to a derangement of the biosphere and the human animal itself. As we've evolved, we've learned to adapt ourselves to our environment through the use of tools, but simultaneously, we started using tools to adapt the environment to be more legible to our tools. In order to have a mass industrial food system, you must terraform the landscape into uniform, straight lines. To be efficient, to be maximally productive, you have to machinify the land. You must control the waterways to water those fields. So you do. Over time, machines have been built to be more and more streamlined, more and more efficient, allowing us to leverage more from the environment. We began to machinify the plants themselves by altering genetic makeup to make a fruit bigger, to make wheat stand up straight and have a big seed head, to make rice more tolerant of salty soils, and countless other examples. The scientists of today are trying to rewire photosynthesis itself to be more efficient. The pesticides of the past are nothing compared to the gene editing technology of today to eradicate more life, more efficiently, more completely, in the service of maintaining a perfect monoculture. Today, agriculture is being wedded with the internet, big data, and AI to make it more precise, more efficient, and to improve yields, the apotheosis of a story that began long ago. Our food itself has become machinified, produced in massive factories, utilizing material from supply chains from all over the world to create laboratory-designed, neurologically addictive foods that can be disseminated globally to grocery store shelves, where we purchase them through machine technology with money we got from our service to other machines. We have designed the world to mirror this food system and the machines that enable it, and in turn, we machinify ourselves. This process has been a slow, methodical alienation from the living world, atomizing us into systems that are legible to civilization, just as the land has slowly been turned, over thousands of years, into a resource legible to machines, things that we have created and now serve. Perhaps this is why these ancient people told this story of agriculture as a curse. Perhaps they had some clairvoyance and understood that this way of understanding our role on Earth, that we are lords, masters, and controllers of nature, would lead to disastrous ends. Without civilization and without agriculture, the world as we know it would not exist, for better and for worse. Only time will tell whether we doomed ourselves or we indeed liberated ourselves from nature's limits. Only time will tell what the true cost is.
We're always worshipping something. Every society is going to worship something. And we worship progress and we worship wealth. And we worship ourselves, actually, fundamentally, because if you don't believe there's anything higher than you, then you're going to worship yourself. And that's what we do. The individual self, the desire for power and control, that's eating the apple every day. That's what we're doing. We're eating the apple every day. We're saying, I don't need God, I don't need divinity, I don't need communion with nature, I don't need any of that, I don't need to follow any natural laws. I'm going to make it all up myself, and I'm going to control the world, and I'm going to become God. Which, by the way, was the offer that the devil makes to Eve in the Garden of Eden. It's like, you can be God.
When Adam and Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we were cursed to toil and terraform the land. But why? We were cursed because we thought we could become gods, separate and higher than the rest of the living community. Our curse was the belief that nature could be controlled by man, that we are the masters and possessors of nature. You don't need to be religious to see the importance of this myth, as we've been acting out this story of hubris for thousands of years. In the quest for the tree of life, we got dangerously sidetracked and ate the fruit of the tree that God forbade us, as he knew we would misuse the knowledge it gave us. And that we have.
If you look at the creation story, we're the last thing, we're the youngest thing. So ultimately, God would like us to share in his creation and be kind of co-stewards of it, but not yet. So all the conflict and the battling with nature and all the rest of it comes into the world as a result of our choice to break the laws of nature and to disobey God. So the consequence of rejecting communion with nature and God and choosing individualism and knowledge and power instead is basically civilization, right? It's that you have to fight nature and nature will fight you. And it's a fundamental story about what civilization is and what the human kind of condition is.
Man is a creature that became intelligent before becoming wise. And today we must face the latent consequences of decisions made and cultural stories that were invented hundreds and thousands of years ago. Though we can't go back, uneat the forbidden fruit, and start over where we began, we can understand that this cycle we're stuck in is self-imposed. We can begin to stop eating the fruit each day. Perhaps it's not even agriculture itself that lies at the root of the problem, but the way we think, the way we see. That is the challenge of our age, seeing differently, thinking differently. We must find a better way, or perhaps we just need to remember it.